If someone says tell me a joke, what is the first joke you tell them? Why did the partially blind man fall down a well? He couldn't see that well. How do you spot a blind guy at a nude beach? It's not hard. You know what they say about those blind prostitutes, you gotta hand it to the monsieur. I had a blind prostitute once. She said I was the biggest she'd ever had. I said, you're pulling my leg. Why couldn't the lifeguard save the drowning hippie? He was too far out, man. Why did the hipster burn his mouth while drinking coffee? He drank it before it was cool. Where did the hipster drown? In the mainstream, monsieur. How do you measure a hipster's weight? In Instagrams. A devout Catholic man has just boarded a plane, and he's really dreading the long flight ahead. All of a sudden, the Pope boards and takes a seat right next to him. What an honor. The man sits there, thinking about how best to conduct himself and what to say, when the Pope takes out a golf pencil and starts doing a crossword puzzle. Asterisk wow. His Holiness does crossword puzzles? Asterisk the man thinks. Asterisk I hope he asks me for help. That'll be my in for a wonderful conversation. Asterisk. Sure enough, the Pope leans over and asks the man, do you know a four-letter word for a woman that ends in UNT? Quote, oh no. The man is speechless. He sits there, terrified but trying his best to put on a pensive face. For about 30 seconds. Asterisk the Pope won't speak to me this whole flight if I say what first came to mind. Asterisk. Then it hits him. Oh, he says. Aunt. The word you're looking for is aunt. Your Holiness. The Pope calmly nods. Ah, of course, he says. Do you have an eraser? Quote, what's the difference between a well-dressed man on a unicycle and a poorly dressed man on a bicycle? Attire. Why can't bicycles stand on their own? They're too tired. But unicycles can't stand there, just one tired sad face. A Buddhist walks up to a hot dog vendor and says, make me one with everything. Carrot. If this doesn't work on its own, there is an extension. The vendor gives him a hot dog and the Buddhist gives him a $20 bill. After a moment of waiting, the Buddhist asks, where's my change? The vendor smiles and says, ah, change must come from within. The young monk arrives in a monastery where he is put to work as a copyist. After a few days, he notices that the monks making copies of the scriptures are all working from copies, not the original. This alarms the young monk because he thinks of how easy it would be for mistakes to be repeated. And so he goes to the head monk and expresses his concerns. Yes, brother, replies the head monk. You have a valid point. But this is the way we've always done it. Still, I better check to make sure there are no errors. So off he goes to the cellar where he spends the entire night carefully consulting the original scriptures. In the morning all of the brothers go down to the cellar and find the head monk crying. What's the matter? They ask, between the loudest of sobs. He groans. The word is celebrate. Quote, a young monk joins a monastery and is told he must take a vow of silence. But as repayment he will be allowed to speak 2 words every 10 years. 10 years pass and the head monk asks him if he has anything to say. Bed hard. The senior monk nods and sends him on his way. 10 years later he goes before the head monk. Food cold. Again, the head monk nods and sends him on his way. 10 years later. I quit. Well, I can't say it's surprising. You've done nothing but complain since you got here. An infinite number of mathematicians walk into a bar. Bartender asks, what can I get you guys? First mathematician says, I'd like a pint of beer please. The second one says, I just want a half pint. The third one says, a quarter pint. The bartender listens for a while and then stops the monsieur. He pours out 2 pints and says, No, you guys really ought to know your limits. In a similar vein, 3 logicians walk into a bar. The bartender asks, do you all want beers? The first one says, I don't know. The second one says, I don't know. And the third one says, yes. Quote, it's both a joke and a shitty brain teaser for job interviews. Two fish are in a tank. One looks to the other and says, "You man the guns. I'll drive." Quote, edit. Thank you, kind giver of gold. My first one. Two soldiers are in a tank. One says to the other, "Blub blub blub blub." Dave was bragging to his boss one day. "You know, I know everyone there is to know. Just name someone, anyone, and I know the monsieur." Tired of his boasting, his boss called his bluff. "Okay, Dave, how about Tom Cruise?" "No dramas, boss. Tom and I are old friends, and I can prove it." So Dave and his boss fly out to Hollywood and knock on Tom Cruise's door. And Tom Cruise shouts, "Dave, what's happening? Great to see you. Come on in for a beer." Although impressed, Dave's boss is still skeptical. After they leave Cruise's house, he tells Dave that he thinks him knowing Cruise was just lucky. No, just name anyone else," Dave says. "President Obama." His boss quickly retorts. "Yup," Dave says. "Old buddies. Let's fly out to Washington," and off they go. At the White House, Obama spots Dave on the tour and motions him and his boss over, saying, "Dave, what a surprise. I was just on my way to a meeting. But you and your friend come on in and let's have a beer first and catch up." Well, the boss is very shaken by now but still not totally convinced. After they leave the White House grounds, he expresses his doubts to Dave, who again implores him to name anyone else. "Pope Francis," his boss replies. "Sure," says Dave. "I've known the Pope for years." So off they fly to Rome. Dave and his boss are assembled with the masses at the Vatican St. Peter's Square when Dave says, "This will never work. I can't catch the Pope's eye among all these people. Tell you what, I know all the guards, so let me just go upstairs and I'll come out on the balcony with the Pope." He disappears into the crowd headed towards the Vatican. Sure enough, half an hour later Dave emerges with the Pope on the balcony. But by the time Dave returns, he finds that his boss has had a heart attack and is surrounded by paramedics. Making his way to his boss's side, Dave asks him, "What happened?" His boss looks up and says, "It was the final straw. You and the Pope came out onto the balcony and the man next to me said, 'Who the fuck is that on the balcony with Dave?'" Single quote. This is my favorite joke. I always crack up laughing at the last line. Long joke, yes, but totally worth it. Oh geez, I'm gonna have to remember that one. Stupid as hell, but damn if I didn't laugh. A sailor sits down at the bar and orders a drink. He looks to his left and there's a pirate with a peg leg, hook hand, and eye patch. The sailor asks how the leg was lost. "A gator ripped off me leg while burying gold in Florida." He asks next how he lost his hand. "A shark bit my hand off while I was throwing the gator into the sea." Amazed at the pirate's bravery, he asked how the man lost his eye. "A seagull shit in me eye." The sailor was shocked and asked, "A bird shit in your eye and you lost it?" Quote, the pirate said, "It was my first day with the hook. You just wanted to post this, didn't you? I'm onto you, op." What did the cannibal do after he dumped his girlfriend? Wiped his ass. That relationship sure went to shit. So there's two blue whales drinking at a bar. The first turns to the second and says, "Now you make whale song noises as awkwardly and as cringe-inducingly as possible," until everyone in the room is clearly a little bit uncomfortable with how long this has gone on. To which the second whale turns to the first and says, "Frank, go home. You're drunk." The absolute most important part of this joke is to take a massive breath before the second whale speaks, like you're about to go off again. This is the part one actually laughed at. Knock knock, who's there? Dishes dishes, who? Dishes Sean Connery. AskReddit. One day God decides to change the rules to get into heaven. He approaches St. Peter and says, "From now on, the only way to get into heaven is for someone to die in an interesting way. I'll leave it to you to figure out what fits." "Okay, got it," says St. Peter. The first day the new policy is in place, St. Peter explains the rule to the first guy, who begins to tell his tale. St. Peter. I am a devoted husband. I love my wife, but I could have been more attentive. One day I decide to surprise her at home early with some flowers. I walk in our bedroom to find her naked, the sheets a mess and a look of surprise on her face. Intrigued, St. Peter asked him to continue. So, I go nuts. I start breaking things, yelling, crying, demanding to know where the man is. Suddenly I find Hi Monsieur, he's holding onto the edge of our 6th floor apartment's balcony. I go over, shouting at him and stomping on his fingers. He pleads with me and yells back, but he falls all the way down, but he lands in some hedge bushes and lives. Well, I'm so upset and enraged I go to the kitchen. I lift the refrigerator up and throw it over the balcony. The fridge lands on him and kills Hi Monsieur. The rush was too much for my heart. I have a heart attack and die. Street. Peter, surprised at the story, saw no problem at letting the man in heaven. As the day goes on, St. Peter hears more stories. Some good, some bad. Then quite unexpectedly he hears one that catches his attention. Well, St. Peter, I work out a lot and take fitness seriously. One day I'm running on my treadmill in my apartment. I work up a good sweat and felt pretty good. Suddenly my treadmill starts speeding up. Panicked, I slip. I tumble backwards over my balcony. By the grace of God, I manage to grab onto the balcony beneath me. Then out of nowhere this fat asshole starts screaming at me, stamping on my fingers and calling me all sorts of names. I lose my grip and fall all the way down to the ground. By some great fortune I live. Then a goddamn refrigerator falls on me. St. Peter, mouth agape at the incredible coincidence, decides the man has earned his entry and lets him on his way. The day winds down and St. Peter sees off the last of those eager to enter the pearly gates. Just as he's about to shut down for the day, one last soul arrives. After a quick explanation of the new policy, the man gets a big, wide grin across his face. Okay, St. Peter, are you ready for this? I am naked, right, and hiding in a refrigerator. LMAO, if you actually told this to me in person, I'm pretty sure I would have fallen asleep. Thank you so much for watching and have a good day.